We're in Daniel chapter 1. Daniel chapter 1. Have you ever looked back at moments? Sorry, Daniel chapter 2. I was wrong. Daniel chapter 2. Have you looked back at moments of your life and asked the question, why? Why did that have to happen? When Maggie and I are planning out our travels for this coming year, and there's a good friend that we haven't seen for a while because they moved out to North Carolina, and there was this window, couple days, that if we hit it just right, they'd be there, and we would be able to make it there too, and we could see them. And we were looking forward to that. And Friday, a friend called me up and said, sorry, my boss just told me that I need to travel that weekend. And it was sad. It was disheartening. That's kind of a minor why. You know, we could ask, why is my family having 2.5 weeks of sickness? So why? Why was I bullied as a teen? That goes through my head sometimes. Why did I not get into the school that I wanted to get into? Why did the closest cousin to me commit suicide when I was 19? Really good friend. Why did one of my best friends in college die of hypothermia? All sorts of different whys that can go through your head. Why, early on in ministry that God called me to, did I go through so much financial strain that I wondered if I was going to have enough gas to make it to the airport to pick up my mother? Why wouldn't you provide, God? A lot of different whys can go through someone's head. Maybe it isn't the past that you are asking the why about. Maybe it's the present. And you're going through torture right now. Maybe it's because of circumstances, jobs, family, friend relationships, sickness, grief, and you're in the midst of it, and now you are asking, why is this happening to me? And it's a fair question to ask God. He's got big shoulders, he can take it. David asked that why question all throughout the Psalms. That's why he wrote those Psalms, is because he was asking why? Why, God? Daniel, the guy we're studying right now, is experiencing that all throughout his life. Why is this happening, God? And today, as we read Daniel chapter 2, the curtain is opened a little bit into the answer of the question, why? Sometimes that curtain doesn't open up in our life, but Daniel got to see that curtain up just a little bit and get a peek at the answer to why. Our text is Daniel chapter 2, but we're only going to start reading the first 13 verses, and we'll get to the other verses later on. Daniel chapter 2. In the second year of his reign, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams. His mind was troubled, and he could not sleep. So the king summoned the magicians, the enchanters, the sorcerers, and astrologers to tell him what he had dreamed. When they came in and stood before the king, he said to them, I have had a dream that troubles me, and I want to know what it means. Then the astrologers answered the king, May the king live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we will interpret it. The king replied to the astrologers, This is what I've firmly decided. If you do not tell me what my dream was and interpret it, I will have you cut into pieces and your houses turned into piles of rubble. But if you tell me the dream and explain it, you will receive from me gifts and rewards and great honor. So tell me the dream and interpret it for me. Once more, they replied, Let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will interpret it. Then the king answered, I am certain that you're trying to gain time, because you realize that this is what I have firmly decided. If you do not tell me the dream, there is only one penalty for you. You've conspired to tell me misleading and wicked things, hoping the situation will change. So then, tell me the dream, and I will know that you can interpret it for me. The astrologers answered the king, There's no one on earth who can do what the king asks. No king, however great and mighty, has ever asked such a thing of any magician or enchanter or astrologer. What the king asks is too difficult. No one can reveal it to the king except the gods, and they don't live among humans. This made the king so angry and furious that he ordered the execution of all the wise men of Babylon. So the decree was issued to put the wise men to death, and men were sent to look for Daniel and his friends to put them to death. Whew. In the passage today, we are going to see that God is sovereignly in control of everything. Yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And before we dive into that, will you pray with me? Father, thank you that you are the God who is in charge. You created the whole world, and you're still holding it together by the power of yourself. Thank you that you are the God that even though you are so mighty and holy, that you came and dwelt among us, to have a relationship with us, that we might know you. A relationship that we don't have to earn ourselves, but it was earned by the death of Jesus on the cross 2,000 years ago. We just have to receive and accept that gift, and I'm so very grateful for being willing to do that and gain from you all these things that we desperately need. Father, today as we are here to study your word, I pray that you would open up our heart and our mind to understand it and apply it. That we would see the truth that impacts every single day, and that we would live according to it. As I'm up here, Lord, I pray I would decrease and that you would increase. And may the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, my rock and my redeemer. Thanks, Father. Amen. God is sovereignly in control of everything, including yesterday. Can you imagine what was going on in Daniel's mind when Arioch, the commander of the king's guard, comes knocking on his door to kill him? Daniel has no idea what happened in the king's presence that night. Daniel doesn't have power or influence yet. Nebuchadnezzar knows that he has some great skills as a wise man, but Daniel and his friends are not in the upper tier yet. So when Nebuchadnezzar has problems, when he needs help, he doesn't call Daniel and his friends. He calls the ones he has always called, the top dogs, the one who has always the answers. But when he brings these people in, as I'm talking about who are you going to call, I got like Ghostbusters theme going around in my head. Sorry. As he calls the people who always get it done to him and says, please let me know, I am scared stiff, they don't give him what he wants. He is so troubled by his dream that he wants to make sure that they are telling him the truth. In verse 3, he says, I had a dream that troubles me. I want to know what it means. So his ploy to get them to tell them the truth is to say, I'm not going to tell you the dream. If you tell me the dream, then I know that the interpretation is going to be right. Verse 5, he says, this is what I've firmly decided. If you do not tell me what my dream and it wasn't interpret it, I'm going to kill you. Kind of drastic. Don't recommend this course of action. But that's what Nebuchadnezzar decided. Now, cool behind-the-scenes fact here. From verse 4 of chapter 2 until the end of chapter 7, the original text was written in Aramaic, not Hebrew. All the rest of the Old Testament is written in Hebrew. But chapter 4 of Daniel chapter 2, verse 4 of Daniel chapter 2 to the end of Daniel 7 is written in Aramaic, which is the native language of the Babylonians. Because Daniel is writing in these chapters to influence the Babylonians to know God. So he wrote in the language that they would know, be most familiar with. Chapter 8 to the end of Daniel is back in Hebrew, because he is writing to his native people, the Israelites, in a language they are most familiar with, to remind them that God is still in charge. If you're reading an older translation, such as the King James, and you get into chapter 2, 3, 4, some of your wording might be a little different than my wording, because the King James translated on a Hebrew understanding of the words rather than an Aramaic understanding of the words. Okay? So if you're reading along an older translation wondering, hey, there's a little differences here, that's what's going on. So Nebuchadnezzar, so that he would know that the understanding of the dream was correct and not just a regurgitation You see, in the wise men's archives of this time, they had these libraries with, okay, if you're dealing with livers, this is what you do. If you're dealing with intestines, this is what you do. And they'd have a whole books in the Babylonian library on dreams and the symbols of those dreams. And so what normally happened is Nebuchadnezzar would bring the wise men, and he'd say, this is the dream. And the wise men would say, okay, let me go look at 1.003, and it'll have the symbols on there. And if you have this dream, it's this symbol and this symbol, and there you go. And Nebuchadnezzar didn't want that. He didn't want to know what the past said. He wanted to know what his dream meant. He didn't want that regurgitation of the dream interpreting book. So miraculously tell me the dream, and then I'll know the interpretation was. But as we know, the wise men could not do this. Because the reason they gave that they could not do this is because they did not know the God who is sovereign and who could give wisdom based upon his ultimate rule. They said, we follow these other gods who we can't interact with. They said it. They admit it. They answer the king in verses 10 to 11, there is no one on earth who can do what the king asks. No king, however great or mighty, has ever asked such a thing of any magician or enchanter or astrologer. What the king asks is too difficult. No one can reveal it to the king except the gods, and they don't live among humans. We don't know what the gods can say, the wise men say. Wow. And why are they following those? They can't gain the information, therefore they can't give the king what he wants, and becomes angry and orders all his wise men killed. Not just the ones in the room, but all of them. Even the ones who aren't in that room. Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Cue Daniel opening the door on Arioch holding a sword to kill him. Daniel has nothing to do with what happened, but he's reaping the result of it. And he asks the question in verses 14 to 15. When Arioch, the commander of the king's guard, had gone out to put to death the wise men of Babylon, Daniel spoke to him with wisdom and tact, and he asks the king's officer, why? Why did the king issue such a harsh decree? And Arioch then explained the matter to Daniel. He asks why. But this isn't a fly-off-the-handle why. This is a why asked with wisdom and tact. He is fact-finding. He's not beating his fist against the wall. He's trying to figure out what happened because he's already come to grips with the fact that God is in charge. Last chapter, he was ripped out of his homeland. He was ripped out of his identity. He was almost ripped out of his faith. But through the circumstances of God providing health and wisdom in a situation that health and wisdom should not have come, Daniel was proven that God was still in charge. In spite of what the secular and pagan nation had to say, God was still in charge. Daniel knew intimately the truth that Jesus preached in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 10, verses 29 to 30. This isn't the Sermon on the Mount, sorry. But preached in Matthew chapter 10, verse 29 to 30, Jesus says, are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground outside your Father's care. And even the very hairs of your head are all numbered. God is sovereignly in control of everything, Daniel knew, even what happened yesterday. Even what happened beyond Daniel's control, and he was just confronted with it right there. Daniel was able to say, yes, I know God is in control, therefore I can be calm. And I can start following him even into my death right now. Because God is sovereignly in control of everything, not only is he in control of yesterday, but he's in control today. You might say, okay, yes, Pastor, that's fine, I suppose. I can admit that God is in control of everything, but what does that tell me about who God is? Are you saying that God is in control even of all the bad stuff? Is that what's going on? Well, let's keep reading what Daniel has to say in Daniel chapter 2, verses 16 to 28. At this, Arioch explained the matter to Daniel. And at this, Daniel went into the king and asked for time so that he might interpret the dream for him. Then Daniel returned to his house and explained the matter to his friends Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, that's Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And he urged them to plead for mercy from the God of heaven concerning this mystery, so that he and his friends might not be executed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. During the night, the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision. Then Daniel praised the God of heaven and said, Praise be to the God the name of God forever and ever. Wisdom and power are his. He changes times and seasons. He deposes kings and raises up others. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to the discerning. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what lies in darkness, and light dwells with him. I thank and praise you, God of my ancestors. You've given me wisdom and power. You've made known to me what we asked of you. You've made known to us the dream of the king. Then Daniel went to Arioch, whom the king had appointed to execute the wise men of Babylon, and said to him, "Do not execute the wise men of Babylon. Take me to the king, and I will interpret his dream for him." And Arioch took Daniel to the king at once and said, "I have found a man among the exiles from Judah who can tell the king what his dream means." The king asked Daniel, also called Belteshazzar, "Are you able to tell me what I saw in my dream and interpret it?" Daniel replied, "No wise man, enchanter, magician, or diviner can explain to the king the mystery he has asked about, but there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. He has shown King Nebuchadnezzar what will happen in days to come. Your dream and the visions that passed through your mind as you were lying in bed are these." We'll get to that in a little bit. All of a sudden, Nebuchadnezzar is faced with a different person, a different message, a different faith than what he faced before. His other wise men said the dream couldn't be known because their God didn't interact with humans. And Daniel stands there strong and says, "My God does." Daniel was able to have peace on that day, staring the sword in the face. He was able to have peace on that day, marching boldly into the throne room of the king who had put a price on his head. He was able to do that because he knew the God who interacts with humans, the God who is completely sovereign. He knew the truth in the New Testament that James writes about in James chapter 1, verse 5. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it'll be given to you. Daniel on that day sought God. Babylonians looked at this strange man, seemingly alone in the midst of them, one wise man in the midst of a crowd sentenced to death. But Daniel was there fellowshipping with his other believing friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and they were seeking God, and they knew that God would give them wisdom. Why did they know this? Well, because God had already shown himself faithful yesterday. And if he showed himself faithful yesterday, that means he is faithful today. You might ask, why, Pastor, does the fact that God is in control yesterday and today help us through hard times? What does that say to us about our God? Well, too often we treat our relationship with God like those of the pagan wise men who wring their hands and say, "Woe is me, I can't get through this. We don't know what to do. It's out of our hands. Everything's in chaos. What's going on? Woe is me." Instead, if we understand that God is in control, sovereign over everything, we must understand that his sovereign wisdom is there for us to use. Contrary to human misunderstandings, wisdom does not have a human origin. It has a divine one. Because of this, at its foundation, wisdom is not a lesson to be learned. It's a relationship to be sought, a relationship to be enjoyed. You can pick up the book of Proverbs and read it all throughout it, and it shows that, of wisdom saying, "Come, be with me." Daniel's wisdom is set here in juxtaposition with the Babylonian wise men. The Babylonian wise men said, "Our wisdom comes from what we learned." And Daniel says, "My wisdom doesn't come from books of dream interpretation. It comes from a conversation with the God who created all things and who is in control." Yes, God is sovereignly in control of yesterday and today, and he's holding out his hand, desiring a relationship with all of us, a relationship paid for by the blood of Jesus Christ on the cross. And he says, "I will walk with you through anything you are going through. I will show you the good that I will bring out of these situations if you would just enter this relationship with me. Will you do it?" And too often we as humans are just sitting back and saying, "Oh, but life's too rough. I don't want to move from here because I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know." God says, "Take my hand. Let me carry you along." And we say, but I need to do all these religious things. I need to check off all these boxes. Then I can come to you. God says, no, Jesus paid it all. It's all done. Take my hand and let me bring you. We say, oh, yeah, that might be well and good, but I'm not sure yet. I don't know if any of you read the comic strip. Oh, now the name's going to... Dilbert, thank you. My dad used to love reading the comic strip Dilbert. It's this guy who works in an office and makes fun of all sorts of office things. My dad would read it and just laugh for half an hour straight. He was like, oh, that just happened to me yesterday. It's great. So I grew up reading Dilbert. The comic strip creator of Dilbert died this past week. He had a disease, cancer, forget which type of cancer, but he had a cancer. And so he knew it was happening sometime. And a lot of his friends were pleading with him to turn to Jesus. And he went on record and said, I will. Before I die, I'll turn to Jesus, but I'm not ready right now. Before I die, I'll do it. But I know, I'm not sure yet if the truth, but I think I've lived a pretty good life, and right before I die, I'll accept Jesus. I'll do whatever I need to do that, and it'll be proven to me if I enter heaven or not, whether my faith was real. That's just so sad. And so many people I talk to say, yeah, maybe, but I'm going to wait, and I'm going to see, and maybe at the end it'll be proven to me, and then I'll make my decision. But then it's too late. God says today is the day of salvation. He says, today I'm going to give you the wisdom you need. Turn to me today. If it's the truth, turn to me today. Today. Daniel says God's in control. He's in control today. I'm going to seek him today. And when we enter into that relationship with the God who gave Jesus for us, the most amazing, comforting truth we find as we go through all these things is I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that God is sovereign. He is in control. No matter what's going on, yesterday, he is in control, and I can trust him, and I can seek him, and he gives me what I need today to live through it. No one else can give it to me, only God can. And if God is sovereignly in control yesterday, sovereignly in control today, that means he's sovereignly in control tomorrow as well. Daniel looks at the king and gives the king the interpretation of his dream. In Daniel chapter 2, verses 28 to 45. There's a God in heaven who reveals mysteries, O king. He has shown King Nebuchadnezzar what will happen in days to come. Your dream and the visions that passed through your mind as you were lying in bed are these. As your majesty was lying there, your mind turned to things to come, and the revealer of the mysteries showed you what is going to happen. As for me, this mystery has been revealed to me, not because I have greater wisdom than anyone else alive, but so that your majesty may know the interpretation and that you may understand what went through your mind. Your majesty looked, and there before you stood a large statue, an enormous, dazzling statue, awesome in appearance. The head of the statue was made of pure gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of baked clay. And while you were watching, a rock was cut out, but not by human hands. It struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and smashed them. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were all broken to pieces and became like chaff on a threshing floor in the summer. The wind swept them away without leaving a trace. But the rock that struck the statue became a huge mountain and filled the whole earth. This was the dream, and now we will interpret it to the king. Your majesty, you are the king of kings. The God of heaven has given you dominion and power and might and glory. In your hands he has placed all mankind, and the beasts of the field and the birds in the sky. Wherever they live, he has made you ruler over them. You are that head of gold. After you, another kingdom will arise, inferior to yours. Next, a third kingdom, one of bronze, will rule over the whole earth. Finally, there will be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, for iron breaks and smashes everything. And as iron breaks things to pieces, so it will crush and break all the others. Just as you saw that the feet and toes were partly of baked clay and partly of iron, so this will be a divided kingdom. Yet it will have some of the strength of iron in it, even as you saw iron mixed with clay. As the toes were partly iron and partly clay, so this kingdom will be partly strong and partly brittle. And just as you saw the iron mixed with baked clay, so the people will be a mixture and will not remain united any more than iron mixes with clay. In the time of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, nor will it be left to another people. It will crush all those kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it will itself endure forever. This is the meaning of the vision of the rock cut out of a mountain, not by human hands, a rock that broke the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold to pieces. The great God has shown the king what will take place in the future. The dream is true, and its interpretation is trustworthy. Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell prostrate before Daniel and paid him honor and ordered that an offering and incense be presented to him. The king said to Daniel, "Surely your God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings and a revealer of mysteries, for you were able to reveal this mystery." Then the king placed Daniel in a high position and lavished many gifts on him. He made him ruler over the entire province of Babylon and placed him in charge of all its wise men. Moreover, at Daniel's request, the king appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego administrators over the province of Babylon, while Daniel himself remained at the royal court. We are just getting to the good stuff, and we're running out of time. The passage here, the second half of Daniel chapter 2, is a key passage of interpretation for another vision that Daniel has later on. And so because of that, we'll hit a lot of this when we get to the second half of Daniel. But briefly, the head of the statue is Nebuchadnezzar. You know, this picture doesn't really show up well, but that's okay. The head of the statue is Nebuchadnezzar and his Babylonian kingdom is what's going on. The chest is the Medes and the Persians, who take over Babylon later in Daniel's life. The belly and thigh is the Greek empire that conquer the Medes and Persians. The legs and feet are the Romans, who conquer the Greeks. And it's an amazing prophecy, especially if you take this with Daniel chapter 10 and 11, and you say, wow, God actually said in detail what is going to happen from Daniel till Jesus. It's pretty crazy. It's an amazing prophecy. So many secular scholars will actually take Daniel 2 and Daniel 10 and 11 and say, Daniel must not have written this, because only someone who actually knew what was going on could have written this. Well, sorry to them, but God knows what's going on. And he told Daniel, and Daniel wrote it down. I can have more discussion on this later, but it's what happened. The mountain is Jesus that he talks about, the capstone that the builders rejected, the cornerstone that breaks those who fall on it and crushes those underneath it. It speaks of Jesus' eternal kingdom that will come at the end of time. It's an amazing prophecy, especially when you take it with Daniel 10 and 11. The point of the prophecy, however, was not to give Nebuchadnezzar a roadmap to the future. God was not saying, hey, Nebuchadnezzar, just want to let you know this is what you can prepare for as you turn the kingdoms over to all these other kingdoms. The point was to prove to the king who the one true God was, and that he is the God who is sovereign over everything, including the future. And when we think about God, sovereign over everything, yesterday, today, tomorrow, and assured of the fact, our response should be the same response that Nebuchadnezzar has. In Daniel chapter 2, verse 47, Nebuchadnezzar says, "Surely your God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings and a revealer of mysteries, for you're able to reveal this mystery." We should, when we see God for who he is, that he is sovereignly in charge, and we can trust him, we can hold on to him, see the wisdom that he gives, and the direction, we say, wow, God, you are amazing. We should respond in worship. We should confess that, yes, he is sovereign. But Nebuchadnezzar doesn't quite get it, though. This is where he falls short. Even though he acknowledges who God is, he refuses to worship him as such. He worships Daniel instead. Daniel 2:46, Nebuchadnezzar falls prostrate before Daniel and pays him honor and orders that an offering and incense be presented to Daniel, not to the king. And then, not to God. And then the king places Daniel in high position and lavished many gifts on him and made him rule over the entire province of Babylon and placed in charge of all his wise men. At this point, even though he confesses this amazing truth, surely your God is the God of gods and Lord of lords and revealer of mysteries, Nebuchadnezzar is still destined for hell, because he refuses to worship and follow God. He would have been wise to heed the words of David when reflecting on how God is sovereign in Psalm chapter 2. Therefore, you kings, be wise. Be warned, you rulers of the earth. Serve the Lord with fear and celebrate his rule with trembling. Kiss his son, or he'll be angry, and your way will lead to your destruction, for his wrath can flare up in a moment. Blessed are all who take refuge in him. We are called, everyone, to realize that God is sovereign over everything, past, present, and future. And that should cause us to bow down before him and not just say, wow, you're pretty cool, but to worship him, to pursue a relationship with him that he provided for through the Son that is prophesied in Psalm chapter 2. Worship and say, you're mine. I want to follow you. I want to pursue a relationship with you because I need you. Nebuchadnezzar wasn't willing to do that. Are you willing? And the cool thing is, when we step up and say, I want to pursue a relationship with you, King of the universe, Sovereign One, when the world is chaotic, when we are asking those whys that go around and around and around and around our head, we've already have a relationship with him. And we can turn to him in that moment, the one who is in control of everything. He gives us his wisdom, and we hold on to his strength. And he carries us. And I'm so grateful. He did that for Daniel, and he can do it for us too. Will you pray with me? Father, thank you for what you do. That you are not the God who sits up in heaven not caring anything about us, but you are the God who is there with us. The transcendent one became immanent to be with us, that we might know you and be known by you and gain everything that we need for this life until finally you call us into the next. I pray that you would be with us this week, that we would turn to you as the God who is sovereign and hold on. And I pray for those who've never accepted you, the gift you give through your Son, Jesus Christ, they might turn to you in faith and find in you what their heart desperately longs for. Thanks, Father.